Hello and welcome. I'm Jade Dupree, content producer and host for the Upstream Content Studio. We are pleased to host today's webinar in partnership with Kongsberg Digital entitled The Operating Model of the Future, Executing the Vision of Digital and AI. Our focus will be on why organizations are moving towards the operating model of the future with a digital performance model. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator and panel. We will have Havard Ostensen leading the conversation as the moderator. He is the EVP and Chief Commercial Officer at Kongsberg Digital and responsible for the execution of the company's global commercial strategy. With more than 17 years of experience in the integrated gas, LNG, and upstream industry, Havard is the perfect person to lead this discussion. Our speaker panel consists of 3 speakers. We have Grant Christie, VP of Business Transformation at Kongsberg Digital. He has over 30 years of expertise in senior leadership and strategy roles. He has been praised for being a visionary team builder in the energy industry and has been involved in developing the digital blueprint for LNG Canada. We also have Paul Shivek, Managing Director of Essentia's Industry X practice. He has 20 years of engineering, manufacturing, and digital transformation experience. Currently, Paul supports his clients in their digital transformation journeys by enabling their capital projects and plants to utilize predictive analytics, IoT, and digital twin to drive performance improvements and enhance decision-making. And finally, we have Luke Charity, who is the Vice President Asset for LNG Canada. Luke's focus is safely delivering cargo and subsequent competitive operations from LNG Canada, the country's first large-scale liquefied natural gas export facility. Luke brings more than 20 years of industry and operations experience to his role at LNG Canada. Now, before I hand over to Havard, I would like to remind our viewers that there is an option to submit questions for the Q&A throughout this webinar. If your question isn't addressed during today's session, we will hand the questions on to Kongsberg Digital to answer afterwards. From all of us here at the Upstream Content Studio, we hope you find this webinar insightful. Havard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jade, for the warm introduction. A powerful concurrence of factors challenges the oil and gas industry and its future, balancing the competing priorities of the energy trilemma, supply chain volatility, and economic performance while running day-to-day operations are amongst the factors keeping energy leaders awake at night. At the same time, the expectations of AI have risen to unprecedented levels, and business leaders are grappling with how to meet shareholder expectations and harness value. Forward-looking companies know that these priorities are big and complex to solve without an innovative approach to ensure profitability, sustainability, and license to operate. Kongsberg Digital is working with many of these companies to transform their businesses with a digital performance model, a DPM, that provides a way to survive the energy transition pressures, reduce risk, maximize shareholder value simultaneously by multiplying performance and resilience. These companies are realizing game-changing impacts on their bottom lines as they leave digital failure, fatigue, and tactical digitalization behind. Today, our panelists will share their insights regarding why companies are moving towards the operating model of the future. They're putting a digital performance model in place to execute against the vision of digital and AI. It's happening today. with at-scale results possible within a 12-month time frame. And with that, I'd like to turn to our panel, and I'd like to address the first question to you, Luke. So if you consider that digitalization has been on the mind of energy leaders for quite some time, let's look at the question, why do you think the market isn't further ahead? And why are we sort of lagging behind here potentially? And where are we really today? And where should we be? Looking forward to hearing your reflections on this.
That's a lot in one go, but I'll maybe just to give you a couple initial reflections. So I think when digital came out of the gates, it was quite hyped. And I think with everything that comes out of the gates like that, there's a lot of expectations that it's sort of an off-the-shelf product where you can just grab it, run out, and you're going to suddenly be better. I think that just proved out to be not quite true in two senses. One was the tools weren't quite there in terms of what we were trying to accomplish. And the second one was, we'll talk about data, I'm sure, extensively here, but I'd say that there was a data challenge. I think we're exactly where we should be right now. I actually think that the product suites are really becoming powerful. They're becoming intuitive. They're becoming something that's giving you the insights and what you're looking for. And equally, the pressure is there, like you said about the trilemma, and the ability to continue to compete in a global commodity market and be sure that you have that competitive edge. So when I think about where we were, I think into where we are and where we should be, I'd love to be further ahead. I'd love to be further down the path. I'd love to be fully AI and machine learning enabled. What I would say is we have established the foundation. We actually see that the tools, the appetite from the human experience, the sort of initial friction of what's all this hype from a user perspective on tools, on platforms, it's actually coming together now. And we're actually seeing the value emerge as those tools, the user's acceptance, and ultimately the insights are flowing. So I'd say, don't get me wrong, I'd always love to be quicker, better, faster, sooner, but I actually think that we're past the hype and into delivery, and that's an exciting thing.
That's actually a very encouraging answer, especially since it all comes back to humans adopting the technology and making progress with that technology. So Paul, you work with a lot of companies across industry, really interested in your perspective on where we are today versus where we should be. Are we leaving opportunities on the table? What's the situation out there from your perspective?
Yeah, Håvard, thanks for that. And Luke, a lot of great perspectives and thoughts that I share in common with you. I mean, some of the things that I see as some of the struggles we're seeing across the industry is one, Luke touched on it, that a great technology, a lot of hype, ensuring that there's that complete organizational or really the business side buy-in, right? I think IT technology is definitely a champion for these kind of capabilities, but you need to be able to bridge that divide, if you will, between the business and what they're trying to accomplish and what technology is trying to do to enable the business to do so. In that process, though, if you think about maybe the last decade, some of the challenges we've had in the industry with the volatility of commodity prices and the reduction in headcount, specifically post-COVID, I think there's just a capacity constraint in all of our organizations to be able to implement and do the effort that you initially need to take to get a comprehensive technological solution out there. So there's some friction in between the business and technology. There's just the limitations from a bandwidth perspective to roll these things out. And also, if you think about some of the foundational elements, ultimately data is so critical. And do we have the governance, the effort, and the time to cleanse the data to ensure that it is able to feed these solutions is so important. And so many of these organizations are massive, complex, integrated organizations. It's just it's a challenge to shepherd some of these items. So I agree with what Luke said. It really does feel like we're finally getting to an inflection point. We're past the early adopters and the curiosity. There's absolutely still a lot of work to do, but excited that opportunities like this exist so we can share across industry with technology companies, with the energy companies that are using the solutions and other service providers to say, what's working, what's not working, how do we enable something that is better for the industry?
Yeah, very interesting. And also, acknowledging that it takes some stamina, dedication to do this, scaling investments appropriately. I think it's really important, to have that realization. Grant, you're our own in-house resident expert on transformation matters. Are we where we should be? And are there things we could do? Are there, ways to think about this that you would like to share?
Yeah, sure. I think, to echo Luke's comments, we are probably where we need to be. The industry has gone through a journey on this stuff, as is typical with any new technology deployment, where initially a lot of focus on the data and getting the data quality, with the mindset of, if I get my data right, I'll then put apps on top of it and apps into analytics. What we're realizing, I think, from the hype to actually achieving scale through that approach, is sort of where the rubber met the road. And now what we're starting to see emerging is a much more pragmatic, getting to a way of working, getting back to, I really need my people to work digitally, not to work with digital tools, and that flip in the mindset. And it's, a little bit of a maturation of fixing all my data to what data counts, and how do I actually bring that together in a performance model so that I really do get the benefits and the promise of digital. So I think, it's a journey. We've gone from focusing on the data to trying to get apps on top of the data, to this realization of the aha, pragmatic. We actually need to work digitally. We need to bring all this back and get to a performance model that brings all this together.
Yeah, I love that. Working digitally, bringing it back to business performance. We're always under that type of pressure to deliver on the business, to deliver on the objectives of a business. But you did touch on data, and this really leads to the next question. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about data, and there was always a lot of talk about data quality, cleansing, putting data at the forefront of business, becoming a data-driven business. And now with generative AI, ChatGPT, large language models, it's really at the forefront. Like, how does data fit in? So I know it's a big question, but I do want to ask you, and maybe Luke, you can, go first. How does data fit into this picture? Is the data the answer, or is there more to the story on this?
Yeah, I think data was a bit of a mind-blowing experience for us. I think the energy industry is probably one of the most rich with data. If I'm talking about sort of a technical, big industry setting, I think for decades we've had information and data all over the place. Doesn't matter if it's your ERP, if it's your process data. We've been data rich. I think, unfortunately, there's a few things, and one of my digital leads, James, and I have talked about this a lot. I said, unfortunately, it seems like we have more of a data swamp than a data lake, as those concepts are sort of coming out. And it was a bit embarrassing, to be honest, because you kind of think, okay, I've got all this data. I know so much about what's going on. How do I actually turn this into something? And then we started to invest really heavily into, how do you clean the data up? And I would tell you that was, like Grant said, quite painful. Prohibitively expensive in many instances, and suddenly we said, like, what are we actually trying to accomplish? So I think with the LNG Canada and the perspective I have on data is that data in and of itself is not the point. What data do you actually need to make better decisions? What data do you need to actually have better insights? What data will drive your digital performance model or your AI algorithms? Like, how will that happen? I think in the last probably 6 to 12 months, we've really gotten quite a bit more, I'm not going to say smarter, but definitely more insightful about what data matters, and then how to get that data into an environment where people work with it, not through disparate apps, but as a holistic approach. Because ultimately, that's where we have a lot of money left on the table, a lot of emissions left on the table, a lot of ability to compete. So I'd never say data in and of itself is the point, but I'd say is that we're discovering and understanding our relationship with data has to be quite a bit more powerful. It has to be something that we are custodians of. Getting that into this environment's been challenging, but I see the early signs of breakthroughs. So I'm excited about it, but data in and of itself and being data rich, it isn't the point, and it isn't enough.
No, I really like that it's more about the actual work and how you put it into the right context to drive some level of performance, and not just collecting, because we can all install more sensors and collect or generate even more data. So we're not constrained there. So Paul, do you share this view? Is there a different story out there? Are your clients talking about data collection still, or is the conversation shifting now?
No, I think a lot of what Luke shared resonates. I think there's also, I don't want to say it's a different approach, but maybe the perspective or the approach, whether you're a brownfield or greenfield, also changes a little bit, right? If you're in a greenfield, you have an ability to set everything up as you're going forward. In a lot of places where I'm supporting clients in brownfield assets, I mean, you may have 100-year-old refinery. Good luck with some of the quality of that data, right? So I think those challenges absolutely exist. I think something else, it's a simple platitude, but you need to start with the end in mind. So I think Luke, spoke to that. What problem are we trying to solve? Trying to cleanse all the data is going to be extreme. That's a long journey. It's very expensive, potentially cost prohibitive if you don't have the end in mind. What are the use cases where the value is coming from? Start with what use case are you trying to solve? Are you trying to improve turnaround efficiency? Are you trying to asset uptime? Start looking, for a compressor, for example, work backwards from there. Identify the systems of record, the data sources that you need, prioritize cleansing those, have those, small wins, and build some momentum behind that, because trying to go sell an enterprise data cleansing project is going to be a long and arduous battle. Now, with that said, we do need to, as companies, take more responsibility and accountability for our data, right? This is a precious commodity that can enable our work, value, and transform the way we operate. But we need to treat that data with that quality. We need to be consistent on the way we manage, transform, cleanse that data, so that the human element that we started talking about of putting in the effort to make sure we update those PNIDs, that whole MOC process, the data cleansing, the contextualization efforts, we have to be committed to sustaining that. Otherwise, those initial investments will not be maintainable.
Well, I think that's a wonderful perspective. We obviously have a lot of discussions about this, and I hear a lot about, we need to stop treating things as a project and see it more as a continuous process. Like it's an evergreen process that just runs, right? So Grant, how do you feel data fits in? Is it the answer, or is there more to it?
Yeah, so I mean, I got an interesting visual there from Luke on the data swamp per se. I want to reference, it was a recent Forbes article, and it pointed out that of the companies on the S&P 500, 95% of their performance is actually linked to decision quality. In the same article, it also linked that the growing and overwhelming obstacle to making high quality decisions is actually just an abundance and a drowning of data in order to that clouds out the key decisions. So I think absolutely data is important, and this comes to the point of working digitally, and driving to the clarity of what decisions do I really need to make that make a difference, and how do I make them faster and higher quality. But just to pick up on what you're saying, Paul, what we're starting to see is a change. The difference between using digital tools and working digitally is this change in mindset. And I'll put out there the digital asset and the physical twin. So this is where I actually work digitally. I create the artifacts when I identify something that needs to change. And then rather than doing work, changing the plant, and then making the data reflect what I did, I actually start working digitally, design digitally, create the artifacts that represent what the plant is going to look like. And then I've already got the built-in, I've built the artifacts, the digital data components that can actually feed back automatically. So it's this whole rethinking how we work to make the data quality be built in and being really focused on what do I need to make a high quality decision faster. So it's bringing these things together that really, I think, put data in the right context. It's one component to making a high quality decision, an important one, but it's also about making decisions. So you need all the components.
All right. So with that in mind, Grant, I'm going to stay with you for a couple of minutes here. So with the backdrop of these opening questions, let's think about the forward-looking picture. So we see that industry leaders are increasingly embracing digital performance models to execute on their digital vision. Can you describe a digital performance model for us? What is that?
Yeah, sure. So a digital performance model, a performance model is really the collection of the key components that make up your organization. So this is your processes, your organizational structure, your governance, and they're fundamentally tied together with a digital industrial work service. So it ties these things together in a way that allows you to work digitally. It uses digital where it's extremely strong is in coordination and transparency. So you have a series of, the performance decisions from the strategic to the asset to the tactical can be tied together transparently. So you can see cascading targets and filtering up results. And it ties together from the data to the patterns, the data patterns for the key decisions you need to make, from the pattern to the action to the output. So if I see a pattern, I understand exactly what the action's required, and it drives a specific output. So it ties that horizontal and vertical strategic decision making together. By doing this in a performance model and having the clear pattern action outcome, it allows the organization to apply this to declutter as the first step. So applying to low value, high frequency problems. So things like filter changes and pump maintenance and changing over from pump A to pump B, operational things. It allows you to apply digital in the decision making of pattern action outcome to declutter those, digitize them, and then because they're high frequency, it allows you to automate them very quickly because there's lots of swings at bat. By putting those processes, pattern action outcomes into a digital performance model, it allows you to drive those towards being autonomous very quickly. It allows you to train large language models and AI on them very quickly. So it pushes that noisy part of your business that is typically low value into an autonomous part of your business. And it frees up the organization to start seeing what are the key things that are actually, what are the key decisions that are actually getting in the way of my performance. And then I can continuously drive a push towards the next simple thing, digitize it, pattern action outcome, and drive a continuous improvement loop. So a digital performance model is the system that drives the vertical transparency of performance with the horizontal execution process, and it drives a continuous improvement and decluttering from the high frequency, low value to upgrade and give your organization more capacity to make faster, high quality decisions. And quite frankly, it makes it a much more interesting place to work.
So decluttering the continuous execution of business to be able to free up capacity so you can be more analytical and make a greater impact. Paul, from your perspective, obviously interacting with a lot of different senior executives in the energy industry, why do you think these executives are turning to a digital performance model as a way of running their business instead of just being a digital bolt-on, so to speak? What kind of problems will that solve?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's several facets that go into this, right? I mean, number one, the pace of change, this need to respond quickly, the competitiveness of the market almost demands this, right? The pressures that we have on our people at the front line and in the home offices are substantial, and so that whatever tools we can help them to make decisions better, make them more accurately, make them safer is so important. And I believe that these tools do provide those capabilities. I think also the processes, the facilities that we have in this industry are so complex, and the ability to get an expert in every location as soon as there is an issue is not possible. So the ability for these kind of solutions to distribute and provide access to real-time expertise anywhere across the globe is something transformational as well. If you just think about really also the sustainability agenda, how we're tracking carbon across that perspective as well. I mean, so there's so many elements that this does improve. It provides that visibility in the integration. I think executives are looking at that, and really this complex value chain view of the world and this integration that is so important for our organizations to be successful. We historically worked in silos. I'm a maintenance engineer. I focus on my maintenance work. I'm in production. I'm in operations. And so this is also blending those responsibilities and the capabilities, because that is something that is happening in the field. And we need to do with the reduced workforce, the reduced amount of talent that we can get access to. We have to enable our people to be more effective and more efficient. And I think these digital solutions do enable that.
Grant, what's your perspective on this? Why is this relevant for senior leaders?
I think it all comes down to the speed of decision making. If nothing else is true, from work generation to work generation, the pace of business, the ability to make high quality decisions faster is the definition of a winning company. So, I think as executives and leaders are increasingly looking to win, be successful, and frankly, even just attract talent, there's an expectation of how a company is going to show up, what the work characteristics are going to be. People are going to expect connectivity. As I said, for companies to win, they need to be able to make high quality decisions faster. So, I don't think it's an option.
Luke, you're doing this. You are a senior executive in the energy space. You're building a massive asset that will produce a lot of energy for the world. I want to ask you, why did LNG Canada turn to a digital performance model to build an asset of the future?
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of a longer answer, because I feel like I was in somewhere between a board meeting and a town hall when I was hearing Grant and Paul talk. So, I'd say that both contexts are true. And maybe I'll talk about first just where we were. And this is, prior to LNG Canada really getting into this space. Some of the facilities I worked at, it was just about one step above hieroglyphics. If you said, hey, this pump, we think we might have some vibe problems. Well, have you talked to, Tom, because Tom knows about that particular pump. Well, why? Well, Tom's been here for 35 years, and Tom has some secret files somewhere in SharePoint, and Tom remembers through oral story that there's actually an upgrade on that impeller that nobody, honestly, that was the work environment we had. And so if you think about that as a sustainable future, obviously there's challenges. If you think the other end of it, we're a commodity business. So it comes plainly down to $1 per ton, but the dollar per ton's become quite a bit more difficult. So when you're making some of these integrated decisions now in the trilemma, from a sustainability perspective, there's carbon pricing, there's offset availability. So in real time, if you're saying, hey, I could produce a bit more, but I might have an increase in emissions, am I at the right value inflection point? Or if you say, look, I need to be reliable, I need to actually have the customers in the LNG space believe that I will be there with those cargoes dependently. Do I take an outage decision to make a bit more, or do I actually not take the outage and stay sustainable? And then, I should say reliable. And then last is for affordability. In real time, I need to see that every cargo's got that balance right in being the most cost effective per molecule heading overseas. So if I think of those two contexts of, we weren't really in an environment that was going to enable that to happen. And the environment has, as Paul said, it's gotten harder. It's a more competitive space. There's higher expectations from the shareholders. Profitability has been brought forward in the energy industry as being, paramount to sustainability and growth. And so then I kind of come down to, what's the reason we went after it? First off, we had the opportunity. So when you're starting afresh in a greenfield, there's lots of things you can decide to do. There's only a few you can get right. And so in embracing, and I often looked at Amazon, they have the cloud system and they've got a digital way of working. And I thought, can't we be like that? Can't we be something interesting? Can't we be, attractive to talent and whatnot? But ultimately, it was an OpEx decision. I'm in a remote location. I'm in a high cost country. I have to make exceptional decisions. They have to be made real time. I have a complex value chain of getting molecules from the Montney into, the fired furnaces in Asia. How does that happen, and how do I do that effectively? And we came down to exactly what Grant said: decision speed and decision quality. I need to know that at every minute of every day, everybody that works at my facility can make the right decision in the right moment because they have that insight available to them. The second one was about human performance. Like, we've accepted that, and I think it's a huge step forward for industry. People make mistakes. I can write every procedure down. I can tell everybody that they're going to make sure they do it the same every time. But in reality, I need help with that. The human animal is not perfect. It doesn't have the ability to repeat tasks and get it right every time, or see the same situation that happens only once or twice a month and get it right. And so what we were really looking for was, how do you enable that human performance element to become better and more predictable? Well, if it's digital, if it's there, if there's an ability for that insight to be at their fingertips without a data deconstruction, an Excel spreadsheet, a PowerPoint presentation, an engagement, and then ultimately maybe a decision sometime next year, we could really break that down to, what do you need to know right now, and what did we do in the past? Simply put, we don't need to redesign every isolation for every piece of equipment every time because it's been isolated 50 or 60 times. There's one good way of doing it typically, and we can now make that at people's fingertips. I think the last one is, and I get a little bit I get excited about this. It's the experience of work. If you want to be competitive in this segment, you have to have a few different key elements now. People have to want to work for you. And Gen Z is a really complex animal. They have a different set of drivers. They have a different perspective on our industry. They have a different sort of view of the future, and they have a different expectation. They grew up with a phone in their hand. And so to me, this was a huge change about how we actually have to be attractive to that generation to be powerful and integrative. Then we have to actually be able to do these problem-solving opportunities from across the globe. So at any one moment, everybody has to look at the same picture at the same time with the same insights, and bring that momentary insight together to get a great decision. And we can do that now from anywhere that we have someone working for us, even if they're on vacation in New Zealand, Grant. It's still possible. But then maybe we get into just sort of the repetitive nature of some of the work that we do. A perfect day in a facility is often that nobody touches anything. And so the ability to make sure that that was the right decision, to make sure that the repeat circumstances that are used to make that possible, that the way we maintain this pump, that the way we read the vibe chart, that all those things happen repetitively is quite key. So I know I got a little long-winded, but I'll say that what filled my heart with breaking the back of what was possible in the digital performance model space was, I was out in the field 3 weeks ago. One of our newest technicians, he's out doing a set of rounds, actually doing some learning. And ironically, he's walking around, I'm standing there, we're talking a bit, and he's like, I'm looking for this exchanger and I can't find it. And I'm like, okay, well, let's have a chat. And he's like, no, just give me a sec. Wandered off, came back, had his iPad, opened up the digital twin. And because he was experiencing the digital twin, how he had learned the facility, from that interface, he was able to find the exchanger he was looking for, could tell what was going on inside it, could tell who had worked on it last, could tell how, it was just a different world. So in the end, it's about competitiveness, bottom line delivery, and to me it's about resolving the trilemma more effectively and being relevant and interesting to future talent in challenging locations where typically LNG plants are. So I'll stop there, but I could go on forever. Very much bought into being more competitive.
I think that's fantastic answer. It's a very comprehensive answer. I think you answered my next question as well. So I'll ask that to Paul instead to see if we get, tease out a little, different answer maybe. But if we were to contrast, a digital performance model with tactical digitalization, can we explain what's new and different when you do a performance model construct, Paul? How do you think about that, and how does that make performance possible, and how does it make resilience and execution of vision possible?
Yeah. I really enjoyed what Luke shared there, and I think we've done a phenomenal job over the last 30 whatever odd years of building point solutions that solve a singular problem for a planner, maintenance technician, a reliability engineer, right? But how do we integrate all these things so you can make decisions up and downstream across that entire value chain and understand the implications of what you are doing or what you are changing, and how does that have a knock-on effect across the entire process or their workflow or that facility or that plant or that process unit. I think this, call it whether it's single pane of glass, really, that integrates everything at your fingertips to be able to have that information enable better decision making is to me the kind of aha moment, the key differentiator. I mean, we've had data forever, we've had all these digital solutions, but how do we bring all this together so that the maintenance technician knows when operations is doing something, when turnarounds are scheduled, how are the things, how we're running the facility impacting how we're doing maintenance, how we're planning for turnarounds, all bringing all these things together. I think Grant touched on it as well. How do you bridge this, all the complexity of these organizations? This is where I feel like these performance models need to solve that, because it is such a problem we've been trying for a long time. It is not an easy problem to solve, or it would have been solved. But I think this is the opportunity to do something different.
So Grant, anything to add to this? What is specifically different here now in this digital performance model universe versus what we've seen in the past?
A couple of things. The story from Luke resonates, where I was in a gas plant fairly recently, and I'd never been in this gas plant before in my life, and I'd spent a lot of time in the digital model and being one of our clients. And as I was walking around, the operator was blown away, because I knew where everything was, and I knew where we were, and I could ask questions, and it elevated the whole conversation to a much more interesting level, for both them and for people working remotely. So it was that aha moment of this is what it feels like to work in a digital company. So moving on, once you get a taste and a sense for working digitally, you will never go back to the flip phone. The flip phone plant, as it were. And it's not to say that you need all the fancy 3D and all the data in the world, as we talked about. It's really about having what you need to make better, high quality decisions. And I can't emphasize enough about how much more of an interesting place it is to work. Elevating from when do I change out a filter and doing a bunch of PMs or stuff because that's just when we do it, to got it. Those are all pushed to what digital's really good at doing, is highly repetitive, low value stuff. I can copy and paste that stuff around the world and get super scale on it. Now let's talk about the really interesting stuff. So I can't emphasize enough about how much more of an exciting place it is to work, and therefore the talent and therefore I've got brain space and capacity and understanding to answer those more integrated questions of how to get the best balance of emissions, cost, and delivery volume out the sound.
This question may be not necessary at this point, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Paul, is this the future? Is this how we work in the future? Does this become sort of the standard going forward?
I mean, I can't see how it doesn't, right? Technology is advancing, and we can either jump on that train or be left behind. If you look, somebody mentioned the S&P 500. Go look back 10, 20, 30 years ago, right? There's a tremendous amount of change. And I know in a lot of cases, the energy industry's been a little bit immune to some of this. Granted, there's been consolidation, but with the sustainability pressures and the electrification of the world, we're seeing these changes. And so and all the companies, the Amazons, the Googles, the Microsoft of the world, right? So we have to find ways to transform this industry. Otherwise, we're not going to get the right talent. We're not going to, be able to produce sustainably, and that's going to be a huge, tremendous pressure on all of us. So I think, yes, this absolutely will continue to become more and more ever present in the industry. I think as the employees of the future are going to demand it. I think the operating context definitely supports it. So I can't see how this will slow down.
Okay, I think just looking at the time here, I think we have time for one more question. I want to ask Luke one more question, and it's a little bit more about people, and it's about the mindset, right? Because we got to win over the hearts and the minds here. So what kind of mindset shift do leaders and organizations need to take to put this type of digital performance model in place?
Yeah, that's I'll go back to a bit what Paul said earlier. I've got an advantage in terms of just being a greenfield site. So I'd say, the one that probably makes it the easiest is to say this is how it is. So ultimately the ability to say that there isn't a way back. We have scuttled the ships. You are now going to work in this digital environment, and that's painful because you're talking about turning off ways of working that people have spent some people 3 decades honing, simplifying, leaning, investing in, and they like them. And so I think from an executive perspective, you start down in the trench with your people saying, look, this isn't going to be easy. At the start, it's going to feel clunky, awkward, difficult. It's going to feel unfamiliar. For you that have the knowledge that we want to make sure we're transferring over the course of your career to others, it's going to feel like you've landed on the moon. In the same instance, what I love about Kongsberg, and I don't mean to overly plug it, but I think when we got down in the trenches together, people started to understand that, hey, I don't understand how my 30-year employee can do their banking on their phone, or they can, ultimately use a Netflix interface or something like that. But they come to work and you want to work like it's 30, 40 years ago. But I really feel like the Kongsberg experience we've had in this recent iteration has actually met the users where they are, and it's made it interesting for them. So your 30-year employees is actually as interested in the change as your 20, 10, and new employee. So I'd say a couple things. One is, be resilient. Absolutely say that there's no alternative. We're going here. You can't really leave the back checks open so people can kind of step backwards. The second is expect a lot from your provider. We expected a lot from Kongsberg. I remember a lot of difficult conversations with Shane at the start to say, how's this going to actually get to a place where the digital workbench is working for the people that use it? And have them rise to that occasion and kind of blow your mind. If I'm honest, at the end of it, you kind of go, this is more than I expected. Maybe the last one is, I think you have to kind of concede to the point that this is just the starting point for where the future is. So it's great that we've taken really lean processes and now we've digitized them. We've now put them into a common working environment, so you have the platform. The next steps are incredible. You really get into what is possible with AI, what is possible with ML. So I think that you have to have access to that future to be relevant and stay relevant. And I think for any executive, you have to go back to, it's not going to be easy. You got to be with your people through the change. You have to make it a must do and no turning back. Expect a lot from your partners in terms of what they provide for you. And then realize that if you don't get on this, you're going to be 2 steps behind, because as AI and machine learning and all these GTP sort of things take off, this is the only way to have access to them.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're declaring the future right here on the webinar. I love it. So, and with that, we are running out of time. I do want to thank all panelists for the brilliant insights. In our view as Kongsberg Digital, we need bold and visionary leaders to take an active role, be open to rethinking existing business processes holistically, collaboratively to execute this vision. And I think that senior energy executives will soon be expected to run businesses digitally, harnessing large language models, Gen AI, managing pressures from board members, shareholders, regulators, and society. That will not stop. We believe that digital performance models are the only way to viably create an alternative to lead future businesses as data becomes more critical to any business. and that the digital performance model can replace today's digital ceilings with the ability to transform how work is done using a holistic service-driven framework, leaving tactical bolt-on digitalization behind and replacing it with a higher order of performance and resilience that will continue to grow. Today, the question isn't whether you should adopt a digital performance model. The question is, how soon can my organization take a leadership role in shaping a better future? And with that, I turn it back to our Upstream hosts.
Thanks, Havard, for taking us through the first webinar in this two-part series. Today, we talked about why organizations are moving to the operating model of the future with a digital performance model. If you would like to learn more about how you can achieve that digital promise, join our next event on June 20th. You will also learn more about how LNG Canada is building the asset of the future with a digital performance model at that webinar. By attending this session today, you will automatically receive an invite to the second session. If you found this webinar to be insightful, please share it with your colleagues and those who you think might enjoy it. Thanks for joining us. Until next time.